What's up, guys? Welcome back to True Space. Today we're going to be speaking about medical astrology, and specifically we're going to be speaking about the relationship, the 180-degree opposition relationship that is created through Gemini, the third house, and Sagittarius, the ninth house. And we like to talk about oppositions the most, or hard aspect in general when it comes to medical astrology, because they tend to be the hardest aspect to deal with from a psychological, energetic level all the way to a physical level. Gemini, the third house, is hot, wet, and sanguine. Sagittarius, the ninth house, is hot, dry, and caloric. So basically, caloric and sanguines, if you never heard of these terms were used to call fire signs, air signs, water signs, and earth signs back then in medieval Europe time, or even the Renaissance in Spain. So they called fire signs caloric, they called water signs phlegmatic, and they called earth sign melancholic, and they called air signs sanguines. And they understood how all the elements work in our body to create perfect health and to create mental health. The moment one of these elements go out of balance is when we get sick, or when we experience some sort of a mental dysfunction. And their goals back then was to learn how to balance these elements in the body so you achieve good health and you don't die early and things of that nature. They started associating each of these elements with a certain humor, and they believed if a person has more of this energy, they're gonna be dominant in this humor more, or this bile, or this substance within the body. They associated fire signs with being caloric, which is associated with the yellow bile, bilirubin, that's found within your liver, that goes to your gallbladder and helps in your digestion. That's because they've seen how fire signs, they have this hot nature of being energetic. They don't like to be still. They like to express their passion, their visions, and their imagination. And they felt people like these have a higher digestion, metabolism, and things like that. They called air signs sanguines, and that was associated with the red bile around your body. And air signs have this quality of being hot, energetic, but also wet, social, which is the same quality that your blood has. Your blood it has to be hot, it has to be wet, it can be hot and dry. And they associated earth signs, which they called melancholic, with the black bile. And their understanding of the black bile, it was the liquid ATP that your body got after breaking down digestion. It's the substance that your body used to create the body, mold the bones and the muscles and things like that. And they associated water sign with being phlegmatic. And phlegmatic, they associate phlegmatic energy with the white bile. The white bile is the mucus that found all over the body. It's the mucus that cover your digestive system to prevent acid from burning through your stomach acid. It's this mucus that exists within your nose that prevent certain pathogen from going inside your body and things like that. So we got the white bile, we got the black bile, and we got the yellow bile, and we got the red bile. And all these biles work together to create the human body. And you're going to notice how simple this system is, but how complex it could get. Gemini and Sagittarius, both of them use yang masculine elements. So masculine elements include fire and air, because fire signs, they externalize their imagination, their vision, so you can see them. Air signs are masculine because they can externalize their communication and ideas and thought and intellect and their mentality. Water signs, they like to receive, they're feminine, they like to receive emotion, connection, and things like that. Earth signs are also feminine in that quality because they like to receive and then practicalize. So we got fire, air, masculine, and we got water and earth, feminine. So Sagittarius and Gemini, both of them, they use masculine element, fire and air, and that associate them more with the fight or flight nervous system, which make them more energetic but light and subtle compared to cardinal signs. Since cardinal signs like Aries and Libra, even they utilize masculine elements. Aries, the first house, they use fire, and Libra, they use air. The fact that they are cardinal signs but also utilize masculine element that makes them utilize their fight or flight nervous system more aggressive than a Gemini or a Sagittarius. This is why Aries will experience chronic fatigue when it comes to their brain and nervous system in the form of headache, and Libra could experience chronic fatigue in the form of kidney problems or blood issue problems. And this is very important to understand how the elements make you more masculine or make you more feminine, because if you are someone who externalize or use a lot of masculine energy, you're gonna wear and tear yourself apart. But if you someone who utilize fire, water and earth, what's gonna happen is that you might suffer from blockages and stiffness type of issues compared to fire signs and air signs who like to externalize what's inside of them, so they can experience fatigue and wear and tear. But water and earth signs are gonna experience blockages, build up, because they don't externalize, they like to internalize, and all the internalization energy plays out as some form of disease in the future. This is why earth signs, they suffer from digestion issues, just like water signs compared to fire signs and air signs who suffer more of chronic fatigue and things like that. They are both mutable, so Sagittarius and Gemini, both of them are mutable, which give them a sensitive, adaptable, allergic quality to the organs and the body system that's associated with. So this is what you're gonna notice with medical astrology. The modality and the element is gonna play out through the organ and the body part exactly, and that'll help you, that teach you how to categorize body part depending on the element and the modality. Gemini, the third house, is highly sensitive, adaptable to what we breathe in. Just think about this, toxins always in the air, and as I said earlier, our body utilizes the respiratory system to breathe in oxygen. But this is why the respiratory system is highly sensitive and adaptable, because it has this quality of having mucus within the respiratory tract to allow capture pathogen before they walk inside the body. And you also have nose hair that works the same way, prevent certain pathogen from walking through your body, because you realize breathing and your nose hair are like your first immune system, and then everything is a layer, if you can understand what I'm trying. Gemini, the third house, represents the respiratory system, while it's highly sensitive and adapted to what we breathe in. On the other hand, Sagittarius, the ninth house, represents the muscular system. Even though it's less specific to the respiratory predisposition, it's ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter, the condition or inflammation, swelling versus tissue alkalinity and flexibility in the body. Jupiter plays out positive alkalinity and flexibility, or it could play out negative swelling, inflammation within the body. But that depends where Jupiter is in your chart and how far Jupiter is from its home ruler, which is Sagittarius. Furthermore, things like eating and drinking toxic food or even seasonal allergies can overload the liver with nitrogen. Our liver plays it's one of our biggest organs in our body, and it plays a lot of impact factor in our health. And it's one of the first organs that are responsible for filtering out our blood, is responsible for storing the blood, is responsible for storing glucose, creating certain minerals and vitamins for the body and storing them also. But what happened is that if the liver gets overloaded with toxins and waste, what's gonna happen is that our filtration system is not gonna work. The moment your filtration system in the body does not work, this is when you allow toxins to build up in your body. This is why when it comes to health, we gotta focus on filtration system. What is your filtration system in your body? Your lymphatic immune system, which is your Cancer fourth house, and then we got your kidney excretory system. That's responsible for filtering out your body too. And then we got your liver, which is an organ belonging to the digestive system, the Virgo 6th house. So the moment these organs or these body parts that are responsible for filtration gets overloaded, we're gonna experience sickness. So seasonal allergies can overload the liver with nitrogen, ammonia, and toxin and waste, which makes sense. Mutable signs rule the transition into the new season. So we spoke about how food could affect your liver negatively, but a lot of us suffer from allergies, including myself, and a lot of us allergies flare out and get affected by it the most when we experience the mutation into a new season. So we got the spring season, which is made of 4 signs or 4 houses, and we got the summer season, which is more made of 3 signs, and 3 houses, and we got the winter season and we got the fall season. But we have them. If you study the zodiac wheel, you would notice that it's always the mutable signs, the flexible signs, the adaptable energy that usher us into the new season or help us to transition into the new season, which biologically in the external world it could be difficult on our body in that sense, which could overload our liver and cause allergic reaction and allergies, like how a lot of people have. So Gemini, the 3rd house, being part of the spring season, being a mutable energy, initiate us or usher us by being flexible and adaptable to go into what? The summer season. Virgo, being a mutable earth sign, usher us into what? The fall season. And Sagittarius, being a mutable fire sign, what does it do? It usher us or bring us into the winter season. So the mutable energy allow the transition into the new seasons, which is very important, to something to pay attention. So mutable signs rule the transition into new season, which will trigger Jupiter. That depends on your chart, and that depends on your, if you have any form of allergies. Jupiter could get triggered due to the mutable signs transition into the new season. The condition of inflammation and swelling, that will trigger Jupiter, the condition of inflammation and swelling, as a biological response to the immune system, which leads, so Jupiter isn't get triggered as a biological response through the immune system, which is Cancer, the 4th house, which is why Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, the 4th house, which would be what? The lymphatic and immune system. So Cancer, the lymphatic immune system, has Jupiter exalted there, so it could use the condition of Jupiter to fight against sickness and diseases. Because think about what's the first thing your body does when you get sick, or your immune system notice there's a certain pathogen in your body. You start getting hot, you start getting fever, you start sweating and things like that. That's how your body works in general, trying to kill it or get rid of that pathogen or that bacteria through inflammation, which is why it's important not to prevent ourselves from going through that inflammation aspect, because it's part of the healing process. But what a lot of people do is they like to use medication to cover over inflammation. This is why I suggest to use more of a natural product, so your body could go through the inflammation process much more smoothly and things like that. Also, this is why inflammation is the silent killer that lead to all diseases, which start as acute inflammation, then build up to chronic inflammation. Jupiter rules the condition of inflammation and swelling. I believe that inflammation is the silent killer, and it's the start of all diseases. Or if you go in the internet, you do your own research, you're gonna figure out all diseases, they start with inflammation. There's something causing your body to be inflamed, whether that's a way of thinking, feeling, whether that's a food, or that's certain spices, whether that's allergies to certain things, or that certain seasons and certain weather type causes your body to be inflamed. So it's important to notice when you start getting any form of inflammation, because acute inflammation build up to chronic inflammation, and by the point we get into chronic inflammation, it can be very hard for us heal ourselves, but still possible. Let's keep that in mind. So right now we're going to speak about what makes the energetic force of Gemini, the 3rd house. Gemini, the 3rd house, rules the ending of spring, like we said earlier, and it's the beginning of the respiratory axis, that beginning of that inhale. Sign Gemini, the 3rd house, have the quality of being hot and wet. They like to be energetic but social and connect compared to fire signs. Fire signs, they share the same quality of being hot, but they're dry. They're not hot and wet like air signs. Hot and dryness makes fire signs be lonely, like Aries be a lone wolf and things like that. But the wetness in air signs is gonna make them want to be energetic and communicate with people and connect with people. That's how they gain energy. They are the masculine side of Mercury, which make them like to push out communication, analyzation. But since they are immutable, they like to view thought from multiple angles. So a Gemini like to externalize and communicate about intellect, logic, things dealing with Mercury, analyzation, and things like that. But since they're mutable, they like to take one idea and view it from multiple angles. This is why Geminis are known to be geniuses, but also to be insane at the same time. But also Gemini, the third house, represent early education and things like that. But the health problems that they deal with when it comes to energetic level, even though you may not be a Gemini, you might experience these things, because we all have a Gemini, a respiratory system, a third house within us, because our body is the 12th constellation and it is our own universe. So the health problem comes from the impurities that are constantly flowing in and out of the lungs and the respiratory tract. This include bronchial complaint, frequent colds, stuffy noses, coughing and sneezing, pneumonia, asthma, heart circulation issues, since the respiratory system is responsible for bringing oxygen towards your heart and circulatory system, so your heart will pump blood towards all your body parts. Nervousness and restlessness. A lot of Gemini suffer from that restlessness and nervousness, because that Mercury and that air energy makes them very active, mentally speaking. Insomnia, they can't sleep. A lot of Geminis, they can't sleep. And a lot of them insanity too, which I said earlier. Even Donald Trump, who's I believe is a Gemini, his wife wrote a blog about him, and she even called him insane. Arms and shoulders and wrist injuries, since this whole area rules Gemini. Just the dualistic aspect of you having arms, shoulder blades, wrist and fingers and things like that. All that is Gemini. Digestion issues, because they square Virgo naturally, so they have a misunderstanding when it comes to your digestive system. Thymus and hormonal issues, since they semi-sextile Taurus, and the Taurus stars or constellation are currently in the third house. By saying the Taurus stars constellation, they're in the third house, I mean this is where Vedic and Western astrologers get confused, because Western, they don't understand the houses, and they don't understand how the stars move into different houses, which is why I said the Taurus stars that got birthed out of the second house Taurus, right now they're currently in Gemini, the third house. So the houses are stationary while the stars and constellation continuously move, but it takes time. But a lot of people in Western Western astrology, they kind of follow the idea of where the stars were 2,000 years ago from a tropical perspective, but they already moved, so they're no longer there. This is what Western people get confused between the sign houses. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini. Mercury is home in this planetary position, which correspond to strength in Gemini, the third house, the respiratory system. This alignment allows the oxygen intake and the transportation of things like oxygen, nutrients through the lungs and the bowel. Sign Mercury plays out as the messenger or the transporter of the gods. And if we view that our body system is the 12th constellation, and each constellation or house represents a different god, and Mercury is our ability to inhale oxygen and bring in nutrients into different body parts, then Mercury is responsible for these things. Mercury will play out as the transporter or the messenger. This is why biologically it plays out as the lung bringing oxygen, and plays out as the bowels since it brings nutrients towards the body, aka the messenger of the gods. And who's the god? The different organs and the body parts within your body. So thank God for Mercury. The World Journal of Gastroenterology, which is gastroenterology, is basically the study of the digestive system. This is their opinion. State that intestinal diseases often result in airway disease and vice versa. So here they're stating is that stomach diseases are synonymous with airway diseases and vice versa. So if you get an airway disease issue, you can experience a stomach issue, and if you have a stomach issue, you can experience an airway disease issue, vice versa. Now, but they don't know why though, but astrology explains why. So those with lung and intestinal diseases often experience a low grade of systematic inflammation. Jupiter, which is I said earlier that all diseases come from inflammation, or they begin with inflammation, but that the digestive system and lungs they share the same issues and vice versa. That's because Mercury rules both Virgo, the digestive system, and Gemini, the third house, the respiratory system. Since the planet Mercury rules these two different body parts, they're gonna be somehow related to each other and they're gonna affect each other, obviously. But if you look at the way the zodiac wheel naturally set up, they square each other, letting you know sometimes there can be difficulty or misunderstanding when it comes to the respiratory system working with the digestive system. Jupiter is debilitated in Gemini, which is 180 degrees away from its home, Sagittarius, the ninth house, the muscular system, being opposite to Gemini, the respiratory system. So Jupiter is away from its home, and this creates a weakness in the respiratory axis, which create inflammation and swelling and over expansion in the lungs, the respiratory tract, due to the condition of Jupiter, which makes a lot of sense. If you notice that you experience inflammation, and the moment you realize you start getting sick, it's associated first with the respiratory system. You start coughing, you start sneezing. That's when you start noticing Jupiter, the condition of inflammation, is trying to tell you, hey, your immune system is fighting something right now, and it's getting played out through your respiratory system as coughing and sneezing. This is why Gemini, the third house, naturally semi-sextile Cancer, because they work together. You inhale things and then your immune system responds to them. Furthermore, if you're a heavy smoker, this alignment will make it worse for your respiratory system, even your digestive system. If your dietary regime diet is heavily acidic, you can develop a lot of mucus in the lungs. And I could even talk about this because I have Jupiter in my third house, and I noticed that with my smoking habits, and I gotta sometimes slow down or take a break, because if I go crazy, what's gonna happen, I'm gonna develop a lot of acidity in my lungs, which is gonna affect my digestive system. But also what's interesting, if you heard of Elijah Muhammad, which was one of the leaders of the black community, who promoted 1 meal a day and his idea of vegan diet, he died of a lung cancer or some form of lung disease. That's because even though he ate a vegan diet, he still ate a lot of mucus forming food. He recommended milk and cheese. Even though he was not a smoker, all these food developed a lung and respiratory issues. Why? Mercury rules both the Virgo, the sixth house, digestive system, and Gemini, the third house, the respiratory system. If you cannot understand what I'm trying to say. Interesting fact, if you don't breathe properly using Gemini, the third house, the respiratory system, during exercise, you will create an anaerobic environment for lactic acid soreness to build up in your muscles. So if you don't breathe properly during exercise, while you exerting your muscular system, moving, experiencing, you're gonna start noticing the fatigue to set in. And if you're someone who work out, you will notice that you start getting lactic acid build up, which is the soreness that build up in your muscles. Sagittarius, the ninth house, but through what? Through the condition of Jupiter, because Jupiter deals with what? Acidity, and lactic acid buildup in that sense is some form of acidity. This is why I tell you to breathe during exercise to prevent the process from happening. Almost in a sense, you could say breathing oxygen buffer in or alkaline that acidity. In a sense, it's like two opposing forces working against each other. This is why they're set up as opposing forces naturally in the zodiac wheel. So through the condition of Jupiter, this is why good breathing allow the mitochondria, which is the house of energy, the thing that in your cells that are responsible for producing energy, to create energy, ATP, through the anaerobic condition, meaning with air. So your body, to create energy, which is ATP, your body needs obviously glucose, and it needs oxygen to combust that and create ATP. This is why obviously breathing is a important component of producing energy within your body. So that's something you want to pay attention to. Also, this is important sign: Gemini, the third house, the respiratory system, square Pisces, the 12th house, which is the intergammetary system, with the skin, the surface of our skin. In the 12th house system is telling us getting air to reach the surface of the skin can be difficult. This is why Pisces square Gemini. And if you look at it from that point of view, from beginning to end, everything building up to each other, if Pisces is the last zodiac signs, that tells you after respiratory system brings oxygen in, and then the heart's delivered to the rest of the body organs, the last part or the most difficult part sometimes it could be to bringing oxygen and blood towards the surface of the skin, which is, if you can bring healthy blood flow and oxygen to your skin, your skin will start to deteriorate. It will start getting damaged and it will start to look fresh, you look more old and things like that. So that's something you want to watch out for. Now right now we're going to speak about Sagittarius, the 9th house. Sagittarius, the 9th house, is the ending of the fall season from an astronomical position. So Sagittarius is the mutable season that will usher us in and bring us to winter season, or you could say prepare us to winter season. So it's the ending of the fall season from an astronomical perspective. It rules the ending of the respiratory axis. So this is after we breathe. This is after the Gemini being the beginning of the respiratory axis. This is the end of it. To the muscular system, even though it pertains less to respiratory issues, but what makes Sagittarius, the 9th house, important to the respiratory test is that the normal breathing in humans relies on inhalation. So this is how Sagittarius plays a very important factor when it comes to the respiratory axis, even though it represents the muscular system. What we gotta realize is that normal breathing in humans relies on inhalation, but for air, oxygen, the air element to be pulled into the lungs, Gemini, the respiratory system, the 3rd house, you must contract the external intercostal muscles found between your ribs and other muscles like the pec minor, major, and serratus inferior. So we know your lungs sits in a box they call the thorax, but for your lungs to be able to pull in air, it needs the muscles around to contract to help it. This is how different body parts, different organs, different body system, aka different houses, different gods work together through biology to do things for you. So what happens that this is why your posture is very important when it comes to breathing. If you someone who have a kyphotic posture, which is your shoulders rounding and your neck is extended like this, and you like to sit like this, like in a computer all day, what's gonna happen is that you closing the possibility to inhaling more air and oxygen in, because you making this area, you're making the respiratory system tight, and things of that in nature is going to prevent you from breathing as much air and things like that. But if you're someone who has good thoracic extension like this, what's going to happen is that you're creating more room for air to go inside your body. And if you just do this for a while, you would notice that you could inhale more oxygen in. That's because you're stretching out and you're using your pec minor and pec major. Also the diaphragm has to contract, which is the muscle below the lungs, has to drop so it can create space for air to move in. The mutable modality of Sagittarius show itself in the contraction and the relaxation created through the sliding filament theory that allow mobility of the body. So Sagittarius, the mutable quality, plays out as how we're able to relax and contract our muscle. If we're not able to do that, we're not going to be able to move. And also in what they call the sliding filament theory, which is basically your muscles, there's 2 proteins in your muscles that allow for muscle tissue to work together, that is actin and myosin. Together they bind together and they create what you want to call the power stroke, which help you to move muscles, tissues, and things of that nature. Also an interesting fact that since Sagittarius deal with mutable energy, I found that Sagittarius the 9th house is responsible for 3 different muscle types in our body. Cardiac, which makes sense since Sagittarius the 9th house is a fire house, so it trines Leo, the 5th house. A skeleton muscles, that's because Capricorn is right there after it, so they have a semi-sextile relationship. And smooth muscles, which basically what makes your organs, your intestines, and things like that. So it's a very important house in our body. Sagittarius, the 9th house, rules the end of the fall season and the end of the respiratory axis. Sagittarius have the quality of being hot and dry, meaning that fire signs like to be energetic. They like to be energetic, but like to be separated. This is where the dryness comes. And even though Sagittarius is a mutable energy, Sagittarius, they tend to be more social than Aries, since Aries is a fire sign which is hot and dry, but it's a cardinal sign too, so they want to be more lonely than a Sagittarius in that sense. But either way, but with Jupiter, it will create an expansion which play out as them want to expand and experience all their imagination, their vision, that fire. But since they have Jupiter there, that will create an expansion quality which play out as them being very reckless, chaotic, separated, detached from the emotion. Their imagination can be in depth. Mercury falls in Sagittarius. If you ever hear of Sagittarius talk, sometimes you're gonna think like, you're gonna tell yourself, is this Sagittarius is out of his mind, because the mutable energy blur out the line of distinction between how far to go and how not far to go. So they go far with their imagination compared to other people. And mutable signs, they all them do this, but depending on the element is how far they go with the Virgo, they go far out with the thinking logically. Gemini, they go far out when it comes to communicating and analyzation and things like that. Pisces, they go far out when it comes to their emotion and connecting the whole collective, which sometimes could overwhelm them and swallow them in that sense. Okay, so Sagittarius, the 9th house, their health issue play out as physical accidents because they're chaotic nature. They don't like to be still. Liver problems, sign the square Virgo, the 6th house. A lot of people like to associate Sagittarius with liver problems, but I prefer to say that's because the liver is associated with the yellow bile, which is bilirubin, will help you digest your food. But so they associate with fire signs. But I feel like since Virgo rules the digestion, it rules the liver also. But since Sagittarius, the 9th house square is Virgo, sometimes those energies, they have a misunderstanding, because Virgo, they have an analytic intellectual way of thinking, and Sagittarius, they have a more of a dynamic like personalities. So a Sagittarius person will put himself in a situation to drink more, overdo things and things like that, as opposed to a Virgo. So but Sagittarius liver problems, this is why the liver is associated with Sagittarius. That's because Sagittarius, they overdo things. They overconsumption of food, overconsumption of alcohol, they overdo drugs, overdo a lot of things, yo. That's because they're the adventurers. They're going on an adventure, like literally. Issue with the pelvic and hips, since this is the area that Sagittarius rules. Sciatica nerves, which is also part of your hips. Rheumatitis and gout, which is, that's because they semi-sextile Capricorn. So inflammation in the muscle, inflammation in the bones, they have a close relationship. This is why it's important to understand the whole medical astrology, how all these different houses work together, because they affect each other one by one. It's almost like step 1, then step 2, then step 3, then step 4. But if step 1 gets fucked up, step 3 won't work out. It's worked out this way. This is the 12th step of the 360 God took in that sense. So Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is like we said earlier, it has a positive side and a negative side. On the positive side, it represents the tissue alkalinity and flexibility. On the negative side, it represents inflammation, swelling, and things like that, being played out through the muscular system. For example, injury that causes an inflammation response. Neptune co-rules Sagittarius also. This is important. Neptune represents the surfaces of organs and tissue, but in Sagittarius, it gets filtered through the Jupiter, the condition of inflammation and swelling. This means with Jupiter is going to be seen in the skin or the surfaces of the organs. So inflammation, and this is why you see inflammation and swelling always through the organ and through the body parts of the human being, because Neptune co-rules Sagittarius. And since Neptune and Jupiter masculine side is Sagittarius, Neptune Jupiter feminine side is Pisces. So moreover, Mercury is debilitated in Sagittarius. Mercury is 108 degrees away from its home. Sagittarius then I have the muscular system. This represents a planetary position which correspond to weakness or hardship or difficulties in receiving oxygen and nutrients from Mercury, the messenger of the god, which will affect your Sagittarius 9th house. So Mercury is losing energy. Mercury is away from his home. Gemini, the respiratory system, and a person who overutilize their muscular system with Sagittarius energy of going on long distance travel and not taking a rest and things like that, because long distance travels works both internally within you and long distance travel externally too. So at Sagittarius, they like to go in adventures and things like that, but sometimes they cannot overwork their body. They overwork their body and they don't know how to sit still. still. This is why it's important, if you are someone who overutilizes his Sagittarius 9th house muscular system, you need to be willing to jump on the opposing energy to balance yourself out. Balancing the chi and the energy electricity in the meridian system. And the meridian system is basically that in Chinese medicine, the understanding of how energy flow around your body. The balancing the chi, energy, electricity in the meridian system through the imbalances with acupunctures. Acupuncture is basically when they use needles or different techniques like massages, things like that, and that returns weak muscles, weak or hypertonic muscles to normal. This is the 9th house, the muscular system. It's sextile Aquarius, the 11th house, which would be the meridian system. So through working with acupuncture and things like that, you could fix the problems that are going on with your Sagittarius 9th house, the muscular system. This is why it's good to you gotta understand the whole wheel. Once you understand the whole wheel, when you have an issue, you're gonna start jumping on the opposing energy and utilizing other energies to fix that issue, as opposed to stuck in one form of energy. AKA, if you're an Aries, you're gonna be an Aries. You can't do that. You gotta learn the whole zodiac wheel. You go through it every year. You go through it every day, every week, every hour, every second, and that's what they call the sine wave. Taurus, the 2nd house, the endocrine system, and Sagittarius, the 9th house, the muscular system, work in coordination to produce contraction and relaxation events in the body. The movement of the muscles initiated by the hormone specific in certain cases, such as the uterus muscle contraction during delivery. This is why this is important though. This is important since Sagittarius, the 9th house, quincunx or in conjunct to a 150-degree relationship between each other, which make these energies don't get along on a psychological level all the way to a biological level. So if you're a person who don't want to experience and go on adventures, you will overwork your body, which your hormonal system will have hard issues dealing with, because your hormonal system is trying to achieve that fixed stability, while your 9th house Sagittarius wants to go into adventures and move. So you gotta learn how to balance these two things out, because you need hormones, health. You need your hormonal system to be in health so it can work well with your muscular system. Since a lot of us, we overutilize our body and we know how to create situations for us to be in chronic fatigue and experience diseases, but we do not know how to do the opposite, put ourselves in situation to heal ourselves, to feel better and things of that nature. But this is it. Thank you for listening.